For Sunday, October 17th, you've found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, MARTA passes a huge expansion plan. Some of DeKalb County isn't happy. In Atlanta, a proposal for a major police pay raise. And Republican Brian Kemp offers up a health care plan. Those are some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
And we are glad you could be with us on this Columbus Day weekend. In some parts of the country, this is known as Indigenous Peoples Day, but we'll leave that alone. Our top story today, after years of planning, MARTA has decided to finalize its plans for a $27 billion expansion of mass transit in the city. And Lori Geary of the Georgia Gang has been looking into that this week, and she has an overview of what could be coming.
Well, Dick, MARTA's general manager and CEO called the approval of this expansion plan an important milestone for the future of MARTA. But he was quick to point out there's still a lot of work to be done in securing more funding. Still, it was a big week for MARTA.
This is an important day in the history of Atlanta and a particularly important day for the story of MARTA.
The two-year-old debate over a $2.7 billion Atlanta MARTA expansion is over. The final version of the so-called More MARTA plan includes 17 projects, partially funded by a half-penny sales tax approved by Atlanta city voters in 2016. The plan includes 22 miles of light rail, 14 miles of bus rapid transit lines, along with 26 miles of arterial rapid transit. The plan looks different than the one originally proposed in May. There's more money for the Beltline and less money allocated to the Clifton corridor. Not everyone was happy with the plan.
Unless that Beltline goes into DeKalb County, I say no.
Now, when it comes to the more expensive projects, MARTA will be in search of more funding from either the feds or from private partners.
And thank you, Lori. It is probably not the sexiest story we've ever led with on the Georgia Gang, but the point is it's so important to the region.
Right.
And I'm struck by that $2.7 billion price tag is just awesome. But I did notice, Lori, and you did too, I think, that a lot of opposition coming from DeKalb County.
There is, and it's important to note, though, that this is the city of Atlanta half-cent tax.
I know.
And so DeKalb may get a chance, but we know Gwinnett will get a chance in March of 2019, and Cobb may or may not get a chance. It depends on what the commission decides.
Well, I was struck by the fact that a lot of people, and it kind of bothers me too, that the Emory annexation took place into the city of Atlanta,
right,
which traditionally DeKalb County, and some folks, Alexis, say that Emory jumped the line, that Atlanta people were voting for an Atlanta transportation expansion.
Right, and that did play out in the end, where they did cut back from initially saying they were going to really put a lot more money into the Emory corridor in connecting to the city, what do you call it, stations that are already in place. So I think people, they heard the complaint, and then of course, Kathy Willard, who has been on our show before, was former president of Atlanta City Council, says that she's really happy with what they did because they really paid attention to the Beltline, and she's been the Beltline advocate.
It was a compromise, wasn't it, Lori?
I think it was. I think everybody got something, nobody got everything.
Right.
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 But I think that she said they got more than they thought.
And it's interesting. I think there's some bipartisan support here as you kind of look at all of the facets of this plan. And I do agree. I think the Beltline, we were worried that it would be ignored, but it's not.
Well, no, there are parts of it that are. They can't make the complete loop.
It's
Not yet.
But they're going
right.
Not yet.
Now, one little thing that bothers me about this is it calls for a huge expansion of the streetcar. Streetcar is a total abject failure.
Not a huge expansion. 3 miles from the.
That's
Well,
miles too many.
it's been a total failure.
the
It's been a total. Even you have admitted that in the past. It doesn't pay for itself. You've had people sleeping on it, and come on.
Well, I think it's great for tourists, and if they can keep it from getting
Tourists
banged
don't
into
like
cars and stuff.
homeless people sleeping on the streetcar.
They're going to manage all that.
Well, it has been a failure, but maybe with an expansion, more people would ride it.
Yeah.
Because if you can get to more places.
Yeah, they're going to expand it
That's
on
a fair
the
assessment.
west
Or
side
take
to
over.
AU Center, and on the east side to the East Side Trail.
On that riding it, you go first.
No thanks.
All right. Another major institution in the metro area and the state is the airport. And even though this MARTA thing has passed fairly cordially. This past week at the state capitol, Phil, a hearing that said things are not that cordial in running Atlanta's airport.
Well, they're not. During this third hearing, you heard testimony on how we've discussed on this show for years on how the procurement process has been rigged and how there's corruption. And this goes back 35, 40 years. In fact, a former TV newsman, Dale Cardwell, actually went step by step as to how this worked and how there was bribery and corruption over the years and how this needs to be changed and basically why you need new management.
Well, and there is a new manager,
Right.
a new sheriff in town,
But,
so to speak.
but the procurement process is still broken.
But remember, the purpose of the hearing is to look at an authority.
That's right.
To take the day-to-day governance of the airport out of the hands of elected officials.
That's right.
Namely the mayor and the city council and most of the mayor.
And to have more transparency and accountability.
Also take it out of the hands of the city and put it in the hands of the state.
That's, well, state authority.
Right.
Which would have city members.
Yes, but still.
And I don't think, and that's quite common around the country. But Phil, did you leave the hearing with any sense that there's real momentum? It's hardly been covered.
No, in fact, I think there is some momentum for it. You know, you have some Democrat members of the legislature that are in favor of this that realize that while it's a great airport and all of that, there's still a problem with bidding. Regardless of race, there are vendors that have been screwed over.
Well, I think, too, that there's some question as to whether a state takeover can happen. It's a little ambiguous on whether they can move forward with that. But something has to be done. I mean, how many years did I cover the airports and the concessions and the bidding process and all of that? And here we have, again, some revelations that the former mayor's friends were also given some favoritism when it comes to getting some, access to the airport. So I think something has to be done on this whole process, and it really has to be cleaned up.
Now, as you know, Lori, there was a bond attorney who very effectively said, the bond issues can be handled in a transfer. That is not that complicated.
Well, that remains to be seen because that is.
Well, everything remains to be seen, but that's what he testified.
Lawyers, but I think it can be done because it's done all over the country.
Oh yeah.
For Mayor Bottoms this week, it was kind of a strange week. She actually won a couple of things. She won at City Council, whether her hand was on it or not, stopping an audit of the Gulch proposal, and then surprising everyone, I think, with the speed at which she called for a huge pay raise for police, 30%. That's a long time coming. Were the two entwined? Did she offer the police pay raise to the council in return for they're not digging more deeply into the Gulch project?
That I do not know. I didn't get any reporting done on that question, but I think it was a brilliant stroke for her to come up with this pay raise, and with the help of the Police Foundation, coming up with a 30% increase for pay, and it's going to put them on
10% for three straight years. And she maintains the money is there.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you look at the opposition to this whole Gulch project, it was fix the problems we have now. And there are a lot of people who are concerned about crime, especially in the Buckhead area. So let's pay attention to some of the current problems before we add any new ones. And a $5 billion Gulch deal, maybe just take some time and slow it down. I was disappointed to see that they didn't get the votes because I thought, well, here's a city council that's going to take a step back. It's a new city council. They're going to look at this. They're going to slow things down, take a deep dive into, is this a really good deal for the city? And then it failed.
You're right, and I think the answer is yes. There was some horse trading and wheeling and dealing, because several councilmen walked out. I don't like when public representatives just walk out on a vote.
That's a tradition of the Atlanta City Council.
I don't care if it's a tradition.
Every council.
I think there was one that was in the room but didn't vote, and I think the other ones had excused absences.
Right.
However, it was an important enough issue.
We have to wrap up, but I've just got to mention real quickly on that same line, Lori, Morse Diggs this week at Fox 5 did a fascinating story about recidivists, repeat criminals, and one guy, 40 arrests. That guy has been in and out of the system so much that his first mugshot, he had a full head of hair, and by the last one, he was completely bald. That guy's
that shows what's happening in Fulton County Superior Court, where you have most of these cases. You've got some very good law and order judges, then you've got some very permissive liberal judges, and the permissive liberal judges are letting them out.
Anyway, well, some nice reporting. We got to get out. When we come back, we'll turn to what we do best, politics. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Is there interest in the November elections, November 6th to be precise? I would say so. We learned this week that absentee ballots are up by more than 100% over what they were in the last midterm elections. And I noticed that Macon-Bibb County has even gone to Sunday voting, which I happen to think should not be allowed. But anyway, cue the church buses, get them rolling. Phil, Brian Kemp rolled out a health care plan. That's got to be a direct response to I think the effective commercials by Stacey Abrams about
The
7 words. Right, the only 7 words.
We laughed at the 7 words thing, and I say that, you know, Stacey Abrams had 7,000 words, basically BS. But what Brian Kemp did, what Brian Kemp did, let's discuss this a minute. It's a patient-centered plan, and of course, it focuses on the insurance market and the flexibility that should be happening to bring down your insurance prices. He's opposed to this expansion of Medicaid, and I don't think people really realize what it means. This is billions of dollars that if Abrams' plan ever were to, God forbid, go into effect, it would dwarf education spending. The liberals would take from education to try to fund this. They'd have to.
But he's looking for a waiver, like some states have obtained.
And a waiver would be a good idea.
Which could be a way to use those federal funds effectively.
That's right.
Well, that's the whole point. In addition to patient care, it's also helped economically develop the rural areas. There have been 7 hospitals in rural areas in the state that have closed because they don't have the money and to operate. Medicaid expansion would help them do that.
Well, that would also help with that private hospital thing that Jeff Duncan and Brian Kemp support.
Right, a rural health care tax credit would be far more effective.
Well, that's not necessarily true, because it's a choice that people can make to make a donation to a hospital to get the tax credit, and that may not be enough of an incentive for people to do that.
Well, again, we don't have the money for a huge Medicaid expansion.
On the Democratic side, Stacey Abrams this week, Lori, said that she will not attempt to repeal the income tax cut passed in the General Assembly this year. She had said initially and all along that she was going to. Now she's changed her mind. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, she knows it was a popular plan, right, among all Georgians. And I think, you know, she is one who's really going out into the rural communities and spending a lot of time in the rural communities. Some Democratic candidates in the past we haven't seen done that. So I think she's hearing from a lot of different Georgians, and so it's allowed her to change her point of view on this particular topic.
She flip-flopped.
Well, that's one way of saying it.
Well, she sees the reality of the politics.
Well,
reality. Okay.
But it's also interesting, her travels now, and I think this is going to become a real issue. Brian Kemp has begun to seize on it. She went to New York City and she met with Michael Bloomberg and Andrew Cuomo, no friends of this great republic. She is having Elizabeth Warren and a Boston City councilman who just won an upset coming. We're going to listen to a Boston City councilman on behalf of Stacey Abrams, really?
We're not going to listen to him, but we appreciate her support. And also, we can listen to some of the things that she has to say because they share similar political ideas. The other thing is, Bloomberg has been very supportive of Atlanta in terms of his foundation. So why wouldn't she not meet with him? Because he has funded both AIDS
because she needs the out-of-state money.
Well, one of the problems.
Also, this is another point where Stacey Abrams has been different than her predecessors. Well, you didn't see Michelle Nunn or Jason Carter embrace these folks. They kind of raised their money but kept it more quiet. Stacey Abrams has really embraced these folks who are from out of state. And I think it's because she's trying to get to that millennial vote. She knows that the celebrities really attract the young people.
Well, she had John Legend at Georgia Tech. That was a typical example of that.
Well, I think that's a good point.
But Elizabeth Warren is a little beyond the pale.
Well, and here's my point. These are a lot of these groups that are funding Stacey Abrams are very radical. In fact, George Soros, who's given $1 million plus to the Democrats and to Abrams, they just are funding groups that are funding people who are screaming at Republicans in elevators and in restaurants. Stacey Abrams ought to condemn this incivility.
Oh, please.
We're
Who's going to
coming
condemn
up to that
Donald
in a
Trump's
minute.
incivility?
Won't you condemn this? You're not for screaming at people. You've never done that.
Well, I might.
Right now.
That's not your Southern upbringing. Let me just say that.
Let me ask a verdict.
Can I say one other point about it? Stacey Abrams says she's embracing the national conversation because she wants to put Georgia in the forefront. and attract some of this money to economic development to the state.
No, it's not about economic development.
Sure
it's about
it is.
a campaign fund.
Well, it is. But in the first place, though, if she becomes the governor of Georgia, Georgia will certainly take on some national position.
And when
Lori.
Republicans have really tied some of these candidates to the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, it's worked in Georgia, right? It has really
Sure.
worked. It's been an effective way to get those people into the ads, to associate them, the Democrats, with the Nancy Pelosi's, the Elizabeth Warrens of the world. However, I did see some polling this week, and I saw one number really stuck out to me, which was 58% of the independents, at least right now, are with Stacey Abrams.
Yeah, I don't buy it.
I'm not
I
sure
don't buy
that that's
I don't
where
buy
the
that
state
poll.
is right now.
I don't buy
Could
it.
be
Well,
closer to
but
50.
you could break that down further, and it's a state of universal truth. The target audience right now is women, college-educated in the suburbs, particularly in the 6th congressional district.
Yes and
that
no.
hasn't changed.
Yes and no.
Because they consider themselves independents.
Well, I think you're half right, but the other part is to, like the Democrats pushing out their base, the Republicans are pushing out their base. I think the Kavanaugh controversy is helping the Republicans, and not just Republicans, centrists that both parties need. I think they're disgusted with the incivility and the character assassination, and President Trump will be coming to Georgia and will pump up the especially rural vote, Dick.
Real quickly, I just got to do this. Toss-up question. Stacey Abrams has a new commercial. I hope you all have seen it. It's pretty effective. And in the middle of it, there is Brian Kemp with a shotgun pointed near, not at, Jake, though at first glance it could look like it was pointed at Jake. Sorry to use you as a proxy, Lori. Is that effective or not?
I say no.
I think it is for her supporters, for sure.
Yeah, I think both bases don't really care. The gun rights people are going to like it, and the anti-gun people.
So it has just another moment.
It is. Republicans and Democrats, we know how they feel about that ad.
Right.
All right. When we come back, we will talk about some of the issues, including civility that Phil just touched on, and we hope you return with us.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
For now, about 31 days out from the November 6th election, all eyes are pretty much focused on the governor's race here in Georgia, but there are some important congressional races, namely the 6th district, which is the Republican motherlode, if you will, that runs from Buckhead up into East Cobb and into North Fulton. And there, the one-year incumbent, Karen Handel, is squaring off against a political newcomer, Lucy McBath. Handel, of course, ran the world's most expensive congressional race against John Ossoff last week. Lucy McBath is a strange candidate in the sense that she is a single-issue candidate, tragically because she lost her son in a shooting incident. I can tell you, being in the heart of the 6th district, she's hardly campaigning, but Lori, she is up on TV.
She is, and it was an effective ad because it introduced us to Lucy McBath. If you don't know, I've interviewed her several times. In that district, because there are so many suburban mothers, she does have a compelling argument in terms of gun control, because you're talking about moms. Now, we know that that has been historically a Republican district. However, she's a very strong candidate.
Well, but does she...
there's a flip side to that, though, if I may.
Is she strong on any other issues?
Well, let me just go to Lori's point. I could take all of you to a gun range anywhere in the 6th district or anywhere. There are more women than ever, especially with crime, that want to learn how to use a firearm for protection purposes. And so I think it's a double-edged sword there. And I think, just to remind the viewer, that the Democrats threw all the money, as you pointed out, into that race last year against Ossoff, and that was their high watermark. I don't see them getting any further than that.
But beyond women learning how to shoot, there are also mothers who are concerned about their children's safety, and the school safety and gun control issue is real.
And in reaction, Karen Handel is not running a hard-edged Republican campaign. She is focusing on things like the opioid crisis, sex trafficking, the environment, almost I don't want to condemn her by saying this, but almost a moderate Republican approach. But she is very conservative, of course. So I think that's effective. We should note this week that Georgia's 2 senators, David Perdue and Johnny Isakson, were all in on the nomination of Judge Kavanaugh to ascend to the U.S. Supreme Court. Of course, as we tape, we don't really know how that's all turned out. But I've been disgusted by the whole Kavanaugh thing. It has been the most uncivil behavior by a major political party in my lifetime. I always thought 1968 was the low water mark in American politics. This is by far. We have now reached the nadir. We are now at the bottom. And we saw just a little bit of that, Phil, when Betsy DeVos, the education secretary, visited Georgia Tech.
Well, that's right. And I'm going to talk about that later in the winners and losers. But, you know, everyone has the right to protest, and the First Amendment is beloved by all of us. But, you know, some of these radicals just laying down in front of her car, come on, and screaming, that's not the way to have a great discourse on what she did at Georgia Tech and what she unveiled.
David Perdue was confronted at the airport, right?
He had to jump into the men's room to get away.
We did. I missed that part.
Yeah, and of course the screaming, the screamers at the
Democrats would have
restaurants.
had him jump in the women's room.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, the point is this has gone too far.
Let's start at the top. The president has been at these campaign rallies trashing the poor victim and just being...
Well, candidates have done that throughout political history. The Democrats have
not
gone
the way
beyond the
Donald
grid.
Trump does, especially since he has been accused
The Democrats have gone beyond the grid
self-confessed molester.
with trying to go to people's homes and restaurants and screaming, and this is outrageous. These people ought to be arrested.
There's the point, I think. When you invade the personal space of a public figure, right? We don't want protesters going to our houses at night complaining about something we said on the Georgia Gang.
Well, I think it backfires for the Democrats because I think it feeds into that anger that the Republicans have to say, look, see, here they go again. We saw all the disruptions throughout the hearings that became annoying after a while, no matter which side you were on. Right. But I think it backfires because it fires up your side to say, oh, look, here they go again.
And also look at Kavanaugh himself. He's a political hack. That's what he is, and he has no business being on the Supreme Court.
But you can say that.
Yeah, did you hear his opening statement?
But let's not get carried away.
He's one of the most brilliant constitutional scholars
But he said it was a left-wing.
You're missing the character assassination. You're missing the character assassination of a nominee. I don't care what president nominates someone to the Supreme Court. This is a dangerous precedent for whoever is president.
Whoever's next, look out.
Yeah, and that's a sad thing. We want to encourage people to be judges and senators and congressmen. And this is the Democrats have gone off the traditional political grid.
I think the same thing about the Republicans.
Well, we'll not resolve that today.
Or ever.
Personally, I hope by the time we tape next time, Judge Kavanaugh is sitting on the U.S. Supreme Court. When we come back, we will talk to you about winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we're back now with winners and losers, and we should note that Theron Johnson is away this week, and Lori Geary has joined the panel for the first time, and I must say thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You need that chair.
It's been fun.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead with winners and losers.
Okay, so since I'm new to the panel, I'm just going to stick with winners and be safe. And Dick, I'm not going to steal your thunder, I hope, but I'm going to say the Atlanta Braves, not just because they are in the playoffs, but because it's their commitment to the community. They honor community heroes. They have a whole week of honoring people who are doing good in the community. And just this past week, some of the Braves went to Campbell High School in Cobb County and gave tickets to the first home playoff game to some of the members of the baseball team. They do outstanding work in the community, and I think they need to be recognized.
And we like the Braves because they're young and happy and enthusiastic instead of being grumpy and concerned about Judge Kavanaugh, right?
Well, I don't know about that. They ought to be concerned about what's going on outside.
Right. Do you have winners and losers?
I do. I want to congratulate Lisa Borders. She was former Atlanta City Council president, mayoral candidate. She has now been named the first CEO of Time's Up, which is part of the women's movement and reaction to...
It's kind of joining Me Too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a part of that movement of women speaking up for themselves.
I liked her better when she was running the basketball league myself, but that's just me.
That's you, because you're a man.
Go ahead. Go ahead, that's right.
Well, I want to congratulate Leona Barr Davenport and the Atlanta Business League for their Super Tuesday conference this past week. They recognized their top 100 women, and it was a great day of...
And inducted one Alexis Scott.
Yes, they did.
Along with Janice Ware and Carolyn Glenn, two other newspaper women.
Yes.
Into their Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Phil, what you got?
You know, I've got a winner. I mentioned earlier our U.S. Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos. She came to Georgia Tech the other day, and she unveiled several really good things. She pointed out what Tech is doing with the city of Atlanta and trying to help students in the STEM area, which is very important. But very important is the helping students with financial aid, and they introduced a new app, which is really interesting. I'm not going to go into it here, but I would suggest that students and parents especially study that.
They can apply for financial aid in 30 seconds.
That's
something
right.
Like that.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's something that never occurred in the Obama administration, so hats off to the Trump administration, Betsy DeVos. And my loser, Alexis, you'll be horrified, is Maxine Waters, one of the uncivil people in this political system. And it's a shame that Stacey Abrams has to, I understand she has to get money, but to be identified with someone who wants disruption and who wants to get into the face of people, and I think that Stacey Abrams ought to condemn this in-your-face smear campaign that some radicals want to do.
Well, you need to condemn your president, too,
Well,
and his smear.
let me jump out here, and one of my losers will be Elizabeth Warren in advance of her visit here. And I have possession of a cookbook called Powwow Chow, where she is listed as a Cherokee Indian contributor. You can't make this stuff up. Go Falcons, they need our help. They're 1-3. The Falcons play on Fox 5 today at 1 o'clock in Pittsburgh. And we need a victory there. This season is lost. See you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.